Welcome to Political Capital. I'm Al Hunt. Shutdown drama engulfs Washington as Republican and Democratic leaders work to avoid the wheels of government coming to a screeching halt. Bloomberg News White House correspondent Julianna Goldman and congressional reporter Lisa Lerer join me now to talk about the political theater in the nation's capital. Lisa, these last-minute theatrics, is this really tense or is it just crisis as usual?
Well, certainly both parties are trying to lay the groundwork for what their shutdown or post-crisis messages are going to be. For Republicans, that means stressing that they fought to the end to get as most spending cuts as they can to satisfy the Tea Party element in their base. For Democrats, it means trying to tag Republicans with this extremist ideological label by focusing on issues like abortion and proving to their base that they kept those issues out.
Do Republicans think they've done all right in this?
Well, the caucus is certainly saying that they're unified behind House Speaker. The House caucus is saying that they're unified behind House Speaker John Boehner, which is a strong message for him. This has really been a very big test of Boehner's leadership, and we'll see how the final vote comes out. But right now, at least, it's looking pretty good for him.
And how does it look from the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue, Juliana?
Well, from the White House perspective, they wanted the president to stay above the fray, to be the voice of reason in all of this, the image of the compromiser. And they think that at this point, that's the image that they've been able to
and they're
portray.
Getting flack from some congressional Democrats about not getting involved earlier.
Well, yeah, because the White House, they wanted to wait in and wait for the president to wade in to take that strong arm role until it could have the biggest impact. They said that if he had been narrating this process the whole time, when he walked into the briefing room the other day, when he had these meetings, when he comes out to the microphones, it wouldn't have the impact, it wouldn't have the same message to the American people.
Well, the other thing it seems to me they may have done by talking a lot about some of these other issues, the Republicans really won on the budgetary stuff. I mean, they, whether it's, 37, 38, whatever it is, it's a huge cutback. So by focusing on some of the other stuff, maybe they gloss over that. And does Obama and the White House feel that since the enemies are the Republicans, that they can get a pass from their liberal base?
Well, perhaps it's some of the damage that has been done by him waiting so long to wade into the debate, is that essentially Republicans were able to frame this as a win for them on the spending. Democrats, the president, is essentially going to have to argue to the liberal base why he capitulated on some of these big spending cuts.
And Lisa, I want to go back to a point that you made earlier, which is John Boehner was around when Newt Gingrich self-destructed 16 years ago with a government shutdown. He didn't want that to happen. But there really was a little bit of theater, wasn't it, in the sense that he might end up with the same deal he could have had 4 or 5 days earlier, but he almost had to go to the wire, didn't he, because of that caucus?
I think that's exactly right. And while publicly his message was consistent, he was saying, we don't have an agreement. I'm holding out for as much spending cuts as possible. In private meetings with House Republicans, he was laying the groundwork for a deal. He was saying, we only control the, 1/3 of one half of government, or 1/2 of 1/3 of government. Right. He was saying, we can only get what we can get. I remember what happened last time. It wasn't great for us politically. We'll have other chances to make spending cuts. So that's what he was telling his House Republicans, particularly the freshmen, particularly the fiscal hawks aligned with the Tea Party, as a way of laying the groundwork to come to a compromise that he knew a lot of people in his caucus would not be happy with.
For both of you, it's sort of interesting. For all the fire and fury over this continuing resolution, it really is really tiny stuff compared to what's coming up, including the increasing the debt ceiling, which is coming up in another, 6-8 weeks.
Oh, yeah. This is just the opening battle of the larger war. The debt ceiling, you look at that and you've been hearing over the last few months, the administration officials from Timothy Geithner, Treasury Secretary, even the president saying that failure to raise the debt ceiling, that's really where the impact is going to be on the markets, on the economy. I mean, we're talking about a hairline shave off of the GDP in the event of a shutdown, and obviously depending how long it were to last. But the debt ceiling, the larger budget battles, these are the battle lines being drawn now, and also setting the precedent for how much they're willing to compromise here.
Lise, you know that House caucus, House GOP caucus pretty well. Do you think that Boehner's hand on the debt ceiling and others is strengthened or weakened by how he handled this?
I think the caucus appears at least to be fairly unified around him. I think they respect him as leader, and he's going into this knowing that his caucus is unified around him. And I think also the fact that these bigger fights are coming, frankly, showed how politically toxic this fight, a shutdown, could be for both parties. You know, people realize that you're dealing with a federal budget of, you know, in the trillions,
right.
And these parties are really talking about a dispute that's maybe 10 billion at most.
Right.
So that seems like small potatoes, you know, and voters realize that, and that's how this could really blow up if there were to be a shutdown.
Even talking about Planned Parenthood, we're talking, what, $317 million here?
Well, but the point of the Planned Parenthood or any of the writers is that's the only leverage Republicans have, right? They can't get something through because with a presidential veto or even through the Senate maybe, but the one leverage they have, one lever they have is spending bills.
The thing they want the most, though, of course, is to defund the health care law that was, you know, the president's biggest accomplishment, I think, from the first 2 years. And they're unlikely to get that. That's something that Democrats, of course, can't support. And that's really going to upset a lot of people in their base, and also a lot of people in the House right now.
Let me ask you this. Paul Ryan unveiled his long-term budget plan. Now, that's not small ball. That's major league ball. Dramatic cuts in spending, privatizing Medicare. How did it go over among his Republican colleagues? I
think the timing of it certainly made this current budget fight for this year a little bit easier for Republicans to swallow a compromise. But while publicly, you know, all the Republicans in the House said they're behind it, it was a great effort. Privately, a lot of Republican strategists, particularly people involved with the, 2012 Republican candidates, are very concerned. It puts them in a box. All these guys are going to be asked if they agree with all the various changes to entitlement programs. And as we know, polling that Bloomberg has done shows that while people say they want spending cuts, when it comes down to the specifics of the cuts, they're less excited about that.
Yeah, they sure are. Julianna, you tried to ask the president about this at the news conference, and he ducked it totally. He wouldn't comment on Paul Ryan. Is that going to change soon?
Yeah, that's going to change really soon. The president ducked it this week. He said that he's focused on getting the budget for this year. But starting in the next couple weeks and the next couple of years, this is going to be a major talking point for the president. And you already are starting to hear White House officials reference the Ryan proposal, for example, saying, by the way, you heard Mitt Romney say that he was on the board with a lot of with the Ryan proposal, and that's something he's going to have to defend, and he's probably going to come to regret that he ever made that statement this week.
They'll zero in on the Medicare
and Medicaid. Yep.
And it's going to be brutal for congressional candidates. Already, the Democratic campaign committees have sent out press releases, all kinds of things, just hammering some of these Republican lawmakers for even considering. Scott Brown was hammered because he considered, thinking about the Ryan plan.
As well as the tax cuts. I mean, it assumes that all the Bush tax cut, it extends all the Bush tax cuts.
Well, the one thing, I talked to Tom Coburn, who's conservative bona fides don't have to be questioned, and he acknowledges that this thing, a long-term deficit plan of any sort, even a down payment, you got to do entitlements and you got to do taxes. One, the Democrats say is unacceptable. The other Republicans say is unacceptable. Someone is going to have to swallow hard if they want to get anything done. This has been a fascinating week, and I thank both of you for being here. And when we come back, we'll look at those deficit challenges that lie ahead. My conversation with senior conservative senator and deficit hawk Tom Coburn of Oklahoma. Senator Tom Coburn of Oklahoma, thank you for being with us, Senator.
Good to be with you.
The next big issue, which will be more important than the current fight, will be over increasing the debt ceiling by early May. What do you think has to be done in the next month before the votes will be there to increase the debt ceiling?
Well, I tell you, I think it's going to be later than that. I think it's going to be sometime between June 10th and July 4th. That's how far the Secretary has said he can stretch this thing out. There has to be, in this country, a plan to solve our very real and acute fiscal problem.
Before the debt ceiling can be increased.
You're not going to have the first Republican vote for that until we have a plan that puts this country on a glide path to solving its problems. Now, one side of that is Paul Ryan, one is the Deficit Commission, but the fact is neither of those go to where we really need to go to stabilize us. There are steps towards that.
We're going to get to both of those in a minute, but almost everybody agrees with you there's a long-term problem. They may be disagreement on how to solve it. But there doesn't appear to be a short-term problem if you listen to the markets. The cost of borrowing is less than it's been in 20 years. The bond market seems very calm today. Inflationary expectations aren't high. I know you've noticed that PIMCO is selling its treasury bills. But short-term, there isn't any crisis. So isn't it better to take care of
I disagree.
You do?
You know, when you see bonds go down in price 9 days in a row, the signal has been sent that people lack confidence and that we're going to see an increase in interest rates. For every 1% increase in interest rates, we're going to spend $150 billion, which complicates the very problem that we're having discussions about today between the president and the leaders. Another $150 billion, and we can't cut 60 or 70? I mean, this is an exponential, this is a problem that could exponentially cripple us. You know, 2% increase in real interest rates for our debt over the next year costs us $300 billion. And I think it's acute. I don't think. I think everybody's looking at that, but that's because you got QE2 out there, and you got the Federal Reserve buying 70% of all the bonds we issue. You know, that is a real problem, because what they're doing is they're debasing the currency, which will result in significant inflation. And that's a tax increase on every middle-income family and every poor person in this country, a significant tax increase.
Senator, you mentioned your Republican colleague Paul Ryan, and you have praised his effort at a long-term budget. It has no Democratic support. It's not possible to enact anything on a partisan basis, is it?
It may be if the problems get acute and quickly. The point is, my problem with my colleagues on the other side of the aisle is, where's your plan? Here's a guy that stood out and put his chin out there and say, here's the real problems. Here's my solution for them. I would caution my colleagues to not be critical till they put one up their own.
Well, one plan that is out there is one that you voted for, the Simpson-Bowles Deficit Reduction Commission. Even your liberal colleague Dick Durbin also joined you. He swallowed his reservations about entitlements. You swallowed your reservations about tax increases to get some kind of a deal. Is Simpson-Bowles going to be the outline of something that has to?
I don't know that.
What do you think?
I don't know the answer to it.
Grover Norquist says it's awful. No Republican should vote for it because there's a tax increase.
Well, there's not tax increases in there. What there is revenue growths that are based on reforming and broadening and the base of the tax code and eliminating tax expenditures like blenders credit for ethanol. Right. We have $1.3 trillion a year in tax expenditures, of which $400 billion, $500 billion is for the very low income in this country. So you have $700 billion that you could work for.
You won't predict whether Simpson-Bowles is best because you said you don't know, but you're part of the gang of 6, the gang of 8, whatever, a bipartisan group of senators that have seriously been working on this.
Yeah, and it's very hard.
It's very hard. Do you feel that you are on the way to success, or you think it's
I can't tell you that yet. We've still got a couple of hard issues that we've not been able to...
What's the hardest issue?
Well, Al, we just don't talk about where our conflicts are.
You have passionately fought against the ethanol subsidies, ethanol tax breaks. You postponed action on a small business bill on that provision. Some of your Republican conservative colleagues, Chuck Grassley, John Thune, fighting you on this. Are you going to get a vote on ethanol, and do you have a chance of winning it?
I will eventually get a vote on this, and yes, I will win.
You will win on the Senate.
Yeah, now it may not be on this bill. If the leader pulls the bill, I won't have an option. But it's, you know, the one thing Harry Reid knows is if I'm going to get an amendment voted on, I'm going to get an amendment voted on.
This year, you're going to win that.
I will win that.
One of the really unusual relationships in Washington, D.C., a town that's marked by partisanship and personal bitterness and all that, is Tom Coburn and Barack Obama, conservative Oklahoma white physician, a liberal Chicago African-American community activist. You talked to him as much as almost any other senator. What have you told him recently about some of these big issues like Simpson-Bowles? And
Well, our relationship is more personal, and I try not to tell him anything unless he asks me.
Mm-hmm. Has he asked you anything recently?
Well, not in the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks. But, you know, he was happy to see my vote on the Simpson-Bowles Commission. He's always knocking me because I won't give him enough votes. I mean, he always chides me on it.
For all of your differences, and they are profound with Barack Obama, why is there this personal chemistry?
I just think we truly like each other. We met when we both came into the Senate. He's got a wonderful personality. He's got a great wife and family. He is a very neat man, and I like him personally. We are polar opposites. But both of us are a product of our life experience. I mean, he came up one way, and I came up totally different, and I see things from a different perspective. But that doesn't make him a bad man. And the whole idea is you can't change anybody you don't love. If you don't love them, you can't change them. And so my goal would be, I love the man. I think he's a neat man. I don't want him to be president, but I still love him. He is our president. He's my president. And I disagree with him adamantly on 95% of the issues. But that doesn't mean I can't have a great relationship. And that's a model people ought to follow.
Senator, thank you so much for being with us.
You're welcome.
Welcome back. We'll go to Margaret, Carlson, and Coburn in just a moment. But first, what would have been an obscure race in Wisconsin has been thrust into the spotlight. Bloomberg News' Tim Jones has been keeping up with the twists and turns of the Wisconsin State Supreme Court election this week. He joins us now from Chicago. Tim, it may be a fitting place to be because you've been up in Wisconsin, but the latest twist and turn is that a Republican county clerk has suddenly found 10,000 new votes. Who's going to win this race?
In Wisconsin? Well, ask me tomorrow, ask me Sunday. They discovered 10,000 uncounted votes in Waukesha County, and that has completely and stunningly turned this race around. Kloppenburg was up by 200 votes and change, and now suddenly the Republican Justice Prosser is up by about 7,500.
The ramifications are pretty important, though, for Scott Walker, aren't they, as to who wins?
Well, they're very important for him, and politically, it's not going to promote peace, love, and understanding in Wisconsin because it's a very polarized place right now, and the Democrats smell a rat.
The Democrats also rather easily won the Milwaukee County executive race to succeed Scott Walker. Is there a sense that only a few months after a big victory that Walker is overreached?
I think there is that sense. The Democrat who was elected was popular. The economy's not really good, but I think an awful lot of it goes back to Scott Walker and a very tumultuous 2 or 3 months that he's had in office. And I think there definitely is a feeling that he's overreached.
And a lot of money spent. I don't know about the Milwaukee race, but in that state Supreme Court race, a lot of money.
Well, $3.6 million in fairly short order. And as you know, there's been an escalating amount spent in state Supreme Court races all across the country in the past decade. And I think this is an indicator of the kinds of money you're going to be seeing spent in other state races around the country, as well as on recall races in Wisconsin.
Well, I was going to say, Tim, this is not the end of the battle. There are going to be recalls of state legislators, conceivably even next year Walker himself.
We may be talking often. There is already one Republican state senator who will be put on the ballot for recall this summer, and there are 15 other potentials. Once Walker has been in office for 1 year, you will see an effort to recall him. So this is going to be an ongoing saga in Wisconsin. All
right, Tim, as they say in Chicago, we'll be back early and often. Thank you. Kate, Margaret, let me turn to you. The Paul Ryan budget. Kate, unlike the current battle, this is not small ball. This is large ball. Is it a political roadmap to a Republican majority or political suicide?
Well, of course, it would be a case of assisted suicide at the hands of Democrat demagogues. The hysterical attacks against this are outrageous, considering it is a serious, sincere effort to deal with the incredible dilemma we face. On the other hand, I don't expect voters to rise up and embrace it, in part because so many of us are in denial about the fix we're in, and in part because so many of us are not well enough informed about the role entitlements play in all of this. We're not going to know, essentially, Al, until 2012. Right. It's a document that's going to, I think, shape the 2012 race. The successful Republican candidate will embrace many of his proposals on entitlement reform, tax reform, ag subsidies, corporate welfare, and the voters will have a stark choice.
You're not going to demagogue against it, are you?
No, I'd never do that.
I didn't
Kate.
think so.
No. But, you know, Paul Ryan and Republicans keep telling us what a serious, bold plan it is. But when you look at it, one of the first things it does is it raises the deficit before it lowers the deficit by extending the Bush tax cuts permanently and lowering the top rate to 25%. So what kind of deficit lowering is that? And then it destroys Medicare as we know it. It doesn't mend it.
So you don't like it?
I think it is not a good thing to go into 2012 with.
That's serious. We could agree on that. Let me turn to something that I think is more bizarre. Donald Trump. Now, his charges about Obama being born in Kenya and some of the other flaky things he's saying, we could dismiss this just simply as the full moon crowd. You know, Elvis is alive in Toledo, or the Israelis were behind 9/11. But a Wall Street Journal poll showed he's tied for second in the Republican presidential primary, Margaret.
Well, he's run a couple of times before, and the Donald is now a caricature of himself, running now for the third time. I'm sure his condo fees and gambling at his casinos is going up. This birther thing can get you a bump in the polls, but it makes him look now a kind of absurd. He's relying on some old interview with the great-grandmother who, in an interpreter, got her words wrong, and they were corrected immediately. That he was not born in Kenya.
Kate,
he was born in America.
Are we being unfair to the Donalds?
His showing in that poll is a little unsettling. I have to allow. It is, though, the silly season. It does reflect, to some degree, a certain dissatisfaction with the emerging field. He does have enormous celebrity. There's something reminiscent to me about Ross Perot. He also has this, I'm an outsider, successful businessman,
Right,
I'm going to
right.
get in there and tell these politicians off. And I'll remind you, Ross Perot also was sort of a sucker for conspiracy theories.
He was. Kate, I promise you this, that if Donald Trump is Republican nominee, I will go to Toledo to find Elvis.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Steubenville, I
Thank you
think.
both for being with us, and thank all of you for joining us. And we'll see you again next week.
Political Capital is a production of Bloomberg Television.